I was literally walking into the most important job interview of my life when I heard a woman screaming for help in the parking lot. What I did next cost me everything I'd worked for, or so I thought. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. My name is Garrett Walsh, and 2 years ago I thought I had my life figured out. I was married to the most incredible woman, Nora, who could make our 8-year-old daughter Paisley laugh until her sides hurt. We lived in a cozy 2-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Then cancer took Nora away from us in 6 brutal months, and suddenly I was a single dad working double shifts at Henderson Logistics warehouse just to keep the lights on. Every morning, I'd drop Paisley off at school and see the other parents in their business suits heading to office jobs, and I'd think about the engineering degree gathering dust in my closet. Nora always believed I could do more than warehouse work. She'd say, "Garrett, you're brilliant." And someday Paisley's going to see her dad in a suit, making decisions that matter. But bills don't wait for dreams, and warehouse work paid the rent. For 6 months, I'd been applying to corporate positions every night after Paisley went to bed. Rejection after rejection. Then Meridian Tech Solutions called, Fortune 500 company, senior operations manager position. The kind of job that would triple my income and give Paisley the life Nora always wanted for her. I spent my last $200 on the suit I was wearing that morning, practiced my answers until I knew them by heart, and even took an unpaid day off work. Standing in that parking garage, holding my resume in hands that still smelled like warehouse machinery despite 3 scrubs with soap, I felt closer to changing our lives than I had since Nora died. Paisley had given me a drawing that morning of stick figures standing in front of a big house with a tree swing. She'd written "Good luck, Daddy" in her careful 2nd grade handwriting. That drawing was folded in my jacket pocket, right next to my heart. The Meridian building towered above me, all glass and steel and possibility. In 12 minutes, I'd walk through those doors and convince them that a warehouse worker could run their operations. Everything I'd worked for, everything Nora had believed I could become, was waiting inside that building. That's when I heard the screaming. Let me back up and tell you how desperate things had gotten. Every night after my shift at Henderson Logistics, I'd come home exhausted, my back aching from loading trucks for 10 hours straight. But instead of collapsing into bed, I'd sit at our tiny kitchen table with my laptop, applying to jobs I wasn't sure I was qualified for. Corporate positions that required experience I didn't have, degrees that felt ancient, skills I'd forgotten I possessed. My sister Celeste would drive over from across town to watch Paisley during interviews. She never complained, but I could see the worry in her eyes when she'd look around our apartment and notice things like the stack of overdue bills on the counter or the way Paisley's shoes were getting too small. Celeste worked as a nurse and made decent money, but she had her own family to support. My dad, Vernon, had a different approach entirely. Every Sunday dinner at his house, he'd shake his head and say, "Garrett, son, you've got steady work. Why are you chasing pipe dreams when you could be focusing on what's real?" He meant well, but he didn't understand that steady wasn't enough anymore. Paisley was getting older, asking questions about why we couldn't go on school field trips that cost money, why her friends had their own bedrooms while she slept on a pull-out couch in our living room. The night before the Meridian interview, I tucked Paisley into that pull-out couch, and she looked up at me with Nora's eyes and said, "Daddy, if you get this job, can we get a house with a backyard?" My throat closed up because I realized she'd been listening to my phone calls, understanding more about our situation than I'd given her credit for. This wasn't just an interview for me. This was Paisley's future. Every rejection letter that had arrived over the past 6 months felt like I was failing her all over again. But this job could change everything. The salary would be $68,000 a year compared to the $22,000 I was scraping together at the warehouse. We could get that house with a backyard. Paisley could have her own room, new clothes that weren't hand-me-downs from Celeste's kids, maybe even piano lessons like she'd been asking for. I kept thinking about Nora and how she always believed I could do more than warehouse work. She'd graduated from college 2 years after me with a business degree, and she had this way of talking about my potential that made me believe it too. Even during chemotherapy, when she could barely keep food down, she'd make me promise that I wouldn't give up on the career she knew I could have. That morning, I'd ironed my suit 3 times to get every wrinkle out. I reviewed my notes until I could recite them backward. Paisley made me breakfast, which was really just toast with too much butter. But she served it to me on our nicest plate and said, "This is what successful daddies eat." Celeste sent me a text at 7 a.m. that just said, "You've got this." Nora would be so proud. Standing in that parking garage, I felt like I was carrying the weight of everyone's faith in me. The screaming cut through the underground parking garage like a knife. It wasn't the kind of yelling you hear in arguments or traffic disputes. This was pure terror, the sound of someone who thought they were dying. I stopped walking and turned toward the sound, my polished dress shoes echoing against the concrete. About 50 feet away, near a black BMW, a woman was on her knees clutching her chest. She was maybe in her 50s, wearing an expensive navy business suit, but she looked completely helpless. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, and she kept gasping like she couldn't get enough air. Her perfectly styled hair was falling into her face as she rocked back and forth. Other people were walking past. A guy in a construction vest glanced over but kept moving toward the elevator. 2 women in scrubs, probably heading to jobs at the hospital nearby, saw her but didn't slow down. Everyone seemed to have somewhere important to be, just like I did. My interview was in exactly 12 minutes. I'd driven 2 hours to get here, taking back roads because I couldn't afford the toll highway. This was my shot, maybe my only shot with a company like Meridian. I'd rehearsed walking into that building so many times I could do it with my eyes closed. Reception desk, elevator to the 14th floor. Ask for Jennifer Martinez in Human Resources. But this woman was clearly having some kind of medical emergency. And nobody else was helping. I walked closer and could see her more clearly. She had kind eyes, even though they were filled with panic. Her hands were shaking as she tried to loosen the collar of her blouse. She looked up at me with the kind of desperation you see in people who think their world is ending. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please don't leave me." Those 4 words hit me like a freight train. I could hear my dad's voice in my head telling me to be practical, to think about Paisley, to remember that good intentions don't pay rent. This wasn't my problem. I didn't know this woman. I had my own crisis to handle, but I could also hear Nora's voice reminding me that doing the right thing matters more than doing the convenient thing. When she was sick, strangers had helped us in ways that saved our sanity. A nurse who stayed late to explain treatment options. A neighbor who brought groceries when we couldn't leave the hospital. A teacher who made sure Paisley felt supported when her mom couldn't make it to school events. My phone had no signal in the parking garage. The woman's breathing was getting worse. I could see the Meridian building entrance, my future waiting just 200 yards away. Security cameras mounted on pillars were recording everything, but no security personnel were anywhere in sight. I stood there for what felt like forever, but was probably only 5 seconds, watching this stranger fight for every breath while my own future hung in the balance. Without thinking, I dropped my resume and knelt beside her on the cold concrete. The papers scattered in the slight breeze, but I didn't care anymore. This woman needed help, and everything else could wait. "Hey, my name is Garrett," I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible. "I'm not going anywhere, okay? You're going to be fine." I'd learned this technique when Nora had panic attacks during her cancer treatment. The doctors taught me that steady breathing and a reassuring voice could work miracles. The woman's eyes locked onto mine, and I could see she was trying to focus on my words instead of her fear. "I can't breathe," she gasped. "My chest feels like it's crushing me." I helped her loosen the collar of her blouse and the tight jacket that was restricting her movement. "Let's breathe together," I told her. "In through your nose for 4 counts, hold for 4, out through your mouth for 4. Can you do that with me?" We breathed together for what felt like 10 minutes, but was probably only 3. Slowly, her color started to return, and her breathing became less frantic. She was still shaking, but the terror in her eyes was fading. "I think I need to go to a hospital," she whispered. "But I drove here and I don't think I can drive." I looked at my watch. My interview had started 2 minutes ago. Jennifer Martinez was probably wondering where I was, maybe already moving on to the next candidate. But this woman was still in distress, still needed help, and there was no one else. "I'll drive you," I said, helping her to her feet. "My car's right over there." She leaned on me heavily as we walked to my beat-up Honda Civic. I felt embarrassed about the dented bumper and the way the passenger door stuck, especially compared to her pristine BMW, but she didn't seem to notice. I helped her into the passenger seat and gathered up my scattered resume pages, shoving them into my jacket pocket. The nearest hospital was St. Mary's emergency room, 20 minutes in the opposite direction from Meridian. As I pulled out of the parking garage, I could see the Meridian building getting smaller in my rearview mirror, along with everything I'd worked for. "What's your name?" I asked as we drove through downtown traffic. "Cordelia," she said, her breathing much steadier now. "Cordelia Brixton. And you just saved my life, Garrett, at the hospital." I stayed with Cordelia through triage, helped her fill out paperwork, and called the emergency contact in her phone. Her assistant, who rushed over immediately. The doctors diagnosed her with a severe anxiety attack brought on by work stress and dehydration. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that she needed monitoring and rest. 3 hours later, as Cordelia was being discharged, I finally called Meridian. The receptionist's voice was cold when I explained what had happened. "Mr. Walsh, the position has been filled. We had other qualified candidates who showed up on time. We can't work with people who aren't reliable." I hung up feeling like I'd just thrown away our future to help a stranger. 3 days later, I was back at Henderson Logistics, loading trucks and trying not to think about how spectacularly I'd ruined everything. My supervisor had given me extra shifts to make up for the unpaid day I'd taken off, so I was working until midnight, my hands raw from handling cardboard boxes all day. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer because bill collectors had been calling more frequently since I'd blown the interview, but something made me pick up. "Garrett, this is Cordelia Brixton. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" I stepped outside into the loading dock area where it was quieter. "Of course, Cordelia. How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you. But I need to tell you something important. I haven't been entirely honest about who I am." There was a pause, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "Garrett, I'm the CEO and founder of Brixton Industries." The name hit me like a truck. Brixton Industries was massive, one of the largest logistics and supply chain companies on the East Coast. I'd seen their trucks on highways, their warehouses in industrial districts. They were everywhere. "I spent the last 3 days having my team research everything about you," she continued. "I know that sounds invasive, but I had to understand who would sacrifice so much for a complete stranger. We spoke to your former supervisors, your current manager at Henderson, even some of your neighbors." My heart was pounding. "This couldn't be good news. Your warehouse supervisor told us you've never missed a day of work in 2 years, even when your daughter was sick. Your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, said you shovel her driveway every winter without being asked. Your sister Celeste told us about how you've been studying for corporate interviews every night after work, trying to build a better life for Paisley." I leaned against the concrete wall, not sure where this conversation was heading. "Garrett, I've been having panic attacks because my company has grown so fast that I can't find people I can trust in leadership positions. Do you know how rare it is to find someone who will sacrifice their own future to help a stranger? Someone who stays calm under pressure and knows how to care for people when they're vulnerable?" She paused again, and I could hear my own heartbeat in the silence. "I want to offer you a position as Director of Operations at Brixton Industries. The salary is $75,000 a year, full health benefits, education funds for Paisley, and a signing bonus that will cover all your current debts." I nearly dropped the phone. "Cordelia, I don't understand. You don't even know if I'm qualified for that kind of job." "Garrett, I watched the security footage from that parking garage. I saw you drop your resume without hesitation. I saw you stay with me for 3 hours, missing the interview that meant everything to you. I don't need to see your resume. I've already seen your character, and that's worth more than any degree or previous experience." 6 months later, I'm writing this from my home office in a 3-bedroom house with the backyard Paisley dreamed about. She has her own room painted purple with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and yes, she's taking piano lessons twice a week. But the real transformation goes so much deeper than the material changes. Working at Brixton Industries has been everything I hoped a career could be. Cordelia didn't just give me a job, she gave me a chance to use skills I'd forgotten I had. The logistics experience from Henderson Logistics actually prepared me perfectly for managing supply chains on a corporate level. Every day brings new challenges that make me feel like I'm finally using my brain the way Nora always believed I could. But here's what really changed everything. Cordelia has become more than just my boss. She's become family. She comes over for dinner at least once a month, and Paisley lights up whenever Miss Cordelia walks through our door. She's taught Paisley how to play chess, helped her with science projects, and filled a grandmother role that Paisley never had after we lost both our moms young. Last month, Cordelia told me something that gave me chills. She said that panic attack in the parking garage wasn't just about work stress. She'd been struggling with the loneliness that comes with success, feeling like she couldn't trust anyone's motives when they knew who she was. Watching me help her without knowing anything about her wealth or status restored her faith in people. She said I didn't just save her life that day, I saved her ability to connect with others. The ripple effects keep surprising me. Paisley's teachers tell me she talks about kindness constantly now, always looking for ways to help classmates who are struggling. She's seen firsthand that helping others isn't just the right thing to do. It can change your entire life's trajectory in ways you never imagined. People ask me all the time if I regret missing that Meridian interview. The truth is, I learned something that day that no business school could have taught me. Your character is your real resume. The right opportunities will find you when you're living according to your values, even when it feels like you're sacrificing everything. 2 weeks ago, Paisley and I were planting tomatoes in our garden when she asked me, "Dad, what would have happened if you hadn't helped Miss Cordelia that day?" I thought about it for a minute and said, "Sweetheart, we'll never know for sure. But I know that helping people is never the wrong choice, even when it feels scary or costs you something important." She nodded seriously, and then said something that made me think of Nora. "Mom would be proud of you for helping someone even when you were scared." That terrifying moment in the parking garage taught me that the biggest risk isn't taking a chance on kindness. The biggest risk is playing it safe when someone needs your help. Sometimes the universe rewards a good heart in ways you never saw coming. But even if it hadn't, I would have been able to look Paisley in the eyes and know I'd taught her the most important lesson of all.